Stretching over 8,800 kilometers, the world's longest undefended border has long stood as a testament to peace and cooperation between two of the world's closest allies. But today, that border is no longer just a line on a map, it's become a fault line cracking under the pressure of a new and escalating conflict. What began as a simmering trade dispute between the U.S. and Canada has now exploded into a full-blown crisis, threatening not only economic ties but the daily routines and livelihoods of millions who depend on cross-border trade. The spark? A series of tariffs that seemed minor at first, but quickly spiraled out of control, drawing the iconic Alaska Highway into the heart of the dispute and turning a vital lifeline into a flashpoint for diplomatic tension. In early 2025, President Trump's administration imposed sweeping tariffs on Canadian goods, citing the need to protect American industries. Ottawa's response was swift and fierce, with Canadian leaders vowing to defend their nation's sovereignty and economic interests at all costs. The U.S. insists its actions are necessary to shield domestic jobs and manufacturing, while Canada stands firm, determined not to be bullied by its powerful neighbor. What was once handled quietly in backroom negotiations has now erupted into the public eye. Rhetoric on both sides has sharpened, with leaders trading barbs and threats in front of cameras, fueling uncertainty and anxiety. The consequences are already being felt. From the bustling ports of British Columbia, where cargo ships sit idle, to the grocery store shelves in Anchorage, now eerily empty, the effects ripple across communities. In small towns and big cities alike, local businesses and families are feeling the strain, as headlines warn of shortages and economic uncertainty. Truckers face longer waits and higher costs at the border. Business owners scramble to adapt to new tariffs and supply chain disruptions. Families on both sides of the border are forced to stretch their budgets as prices climb and uncertainty grows. The border, once a symbol of partnership and shared prosperity, now stands as a stark reminder of how quickly alliances can be tested and trust can erode. As both nations dig in, the world watches and wonders. Can this historic friendship survive the strain of a new trade war, or is the era of easy cooperation coming to an end? The crisis erupted when President Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian goods in March 2025. The move, meant to protect American jobs, sent shockwaves through Canada's economy. Trump's tactic, threaten, then delay, created confusion and frustration in Ottawa. Canadian leaders, tired of waiting, decided a strong response was needed. The Canadian dollar wobbled, industries braced for impact, and Prime Minister Trudeau condemned the tariffs as a very dumb thing to do. The tariffs weren't just policy, they were a political statement demanding a dramatic answer. Canada's resolve hardened, it was time to hit back. The stage was set for a new kind of retaliation, one that would target a unique American vulnerability. The firestorm was no longer just about trade, it was about national pride. The conflict was about to escalate far beyond anyone's expectations. British Columbia's Premier, David Eby, struck back with a bold and unprecedented plan, determined to defend his province's interests in the face of mounting U.S. economic pressure. Eby, known for his assertive leadership, stepped up to the podium and announced a move that would send shockwaves across the border. He proposed new legislation that would impose significant tolls on all U.S. commercial trucks traveling through British Columbia's highways en route to Alaska. This wasn't just a minor fee, it was a direct response designed to hit where it hurt most: the flow of goods to America's northernmost state. The plan specifically targeted the critical supply corridor that keeps Alaska stocked with food, fuel, and other essentials. Every day, hundreds of trucks make the long journey up the Alaska Highway, carrying everything from groceries to construction materials. Disrupting this route would have immediate and far-reaching consequences for Alaskan communities. Eby framed the move as an act of self-defense, telling a crowd, "Trump has declared economic war on our country, Canadians are standing tall." His words resonated with many who felt Canada needed to show strength and unity in the face of external threats. The plan was designed for swift implementation, using existing weigh stations and toll booths along the highway network to collect the new fees. This meant that the province could act quickly without waiting for new infrastructure or lengthy bureaucratic processes. The Alaska Highway, often called Alaska's lifeline, was suddenly transformed into a powerful bargaining chip. For decades, it had symbolized cooperation between the two countries. Now, it was at the center of a high-stakes economic standoff. While some experts warned that international agreements and trade treaties could complicate the plan, the BC government expressed confidence in its legal right to act in defense of provincial interests. Legal teams were already preparing for potential challenges from Washington. The message was clear. If the U.S. inflicts economic pain on Canada, Canada will respond in kind. The era of quiet diplomacy was over. Retaliation would be swift and visible. This bold move shifted the conflict from the federal level to the provinces, raising the stakes and drawing in new players. Suddenly, provincial leaders across Canada were watching closely, considering their own responses. Eby also used the moment to call for national unity, urging provinces to break down internal trade barriers and work together to strengthen Canada's economic resilience. The crisis, he argued, could be a catalyst for long overdue reforms. The Alaska toll plan quickly became a symbol of Canadian resolve, capturing the public's imagination and changing the cross-border dynamic. For many, it was a turning point, a moment when Canada stood firm and made its voice heard on the world stage. Washington responded swiftly to BC's toll threat, treating it as a direct challenge to American interests and the vital economic link between Alaska and the lower 48 states. The U.S. government, already wary of disruptions to cross-border commerce, saw the move as more than just a local dispute. It was a test of federal resolve and regional alliances. Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan, a vocal advocate for his state's tourism industry, quickly took center stage. He warned that if Canada imposed tolls on American vehicles, he would push Congress to suspend the Passenger Vessel Services Act, a law that has shaped North American cruise routes for over a century. The Passenger Vessel Services Act requires foreign-flagged cruise ships to stop in Canada when traveling between U.S. ports, making cities like Vancouver and Victoria essential stops for the lucrative Alaska cruise market. These Canadian ports have long benefited from the steady flow of American tourists, supporting thousands of jobs and local businesses. Sullivan's message was clear and forceful: "Don't mess with Alaska, we'll bypass your ports." His words echoed through both capitals, signaling that the U.S. was prepared to escalate if necessary. He proposed a legislative waiver or even an executive order to allow cruise ships to sail directly from Seattle to Anchorage, cutting Canada out of the route entirely. This would be a dramatic shift, upending decades of established travel patterns and threatening the economic lifeblood of several Canadian cities. Billions in Canadian tourism revenue were suddenly at risk. The cruise industry is a cornerstone of BC's economy, especially during the summer months, when ships bring waves of visitors to local shops, restaurants, and attractions. The mere threat of losing this business sent shockwaves through the region. The threat was not an empty one. Congress had already granted a temporary waiver during the COVID-19 pandemic, allowing ships to bypass Canada when its ports were closed. That precedent showed just how quickly U.S. lawmakers could act when Alaska's economy was on the line. Alaska's other senator, Lisa Murkowski, had even pushed for a permanent exemption from the law, arguing that her state's unique geography and dependence on tourism warranted special treatment. The political momentum was building on both sides of the aisle. The cruise ship threat struck at the heart of BC's economy, mirroring the impact of the toll plan on Alaska. Both sides were now targeting each other's most vulnerable industries, raising the stakes of the standoff. The dispute had expanded beyond highways to the high seas, with each country leveraging its strategic advantages. The transportation standoff now spanned both land and water, as officials on both sides looked for ways to pressure their counterparts. The deep economic ties that usually bind the U.S. and Canada together had become weapons in a high-stakes game of brinkmanship. Trade, tourism, and cross-border cooperation were all suddenly in jeopardy. With both sides digging in, the conflict showed no signs of an easy resolution. The path forward was uncertain, and the stakes for both nations had never been higher. For Alaska, tolls on the highway aren't just numbers, they threaten the state's lifeline. While most cargo arrives by sea, trucks deliver the most critical, time-sensitive goods: fresh food, dairy, and vital equipment. Any delay or cost increase would hit every Alaskan household, raising prices and risking shortages. Alaska's oil and gas industry, too, relies on overland shipments for essential parts. The Alaska Trucking Association warned that tolls would disrupt supply chains and inflate costs. The highway, once a symbol of cooperation, had become a choke point, leaving Alaskans anxious as their lifeline hung in the balance. The trade war's shadow looms over tourism on both sides of the border. Even before tolls or cruise changes, uncertainty led to softer bookings for Alaska's 2025 summer season. The threat to the cruise industry, Alaska's tourism cornerstone, put thousands of small businesses at risk. Canadian travelers began canceling trips to Alaska, while U.S. threats to bypass Canadian ports endangered billions in revenue for cities like Vancouver and Victoria. The mere possibility of disruption was enough to poison the well of cross-border goodwill. Tourism, once a bridge between neighbors, was now a casualty of economic conflict. Political leaders' words have become weapons in this standoff. BC Premier David Eby framed the toll plan as a defense of sovereignty. Canadians are standing tall. Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan countered, "Don't mess with Alaska, we'll bypass your ports." Prime Minister Trudeau called Trump's tariffs a very dumb thing to do, backing provincial action with federal tariffs. Alaska's Governor Dunleavy urged restraint, fearing escalation could devastate his state's economy. Leaders on both sides are rallying their citizens, making compromise harder. Their soundbites, economic war, don't mess with Alaska, have become rallying cries. The war of words is fueling the economic conflict. The rift is growing deeper. BC's bold move sparked a wave of national resistance. Ontario, Canada's economic engine, imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., targeting American consumers directly. As a major energy supplier, Ontario's move showed the fight was national, not just regional. In the Yukon, Premier Range-Pillai halted liquor purchases from U.S. companies and restricted American access to government contracts. Even small territories joined the pushback, signaling unity across Canada. The message, an attack on one province, is an attack on all. Calls to break down internal trade barriers gained urgency, aiming to strengthen Canada's domestic market. The coordinated response showed Canada's resolve to resist U.S. pressure. Coast to coast, the nation stood together. This trade war isn't just politics, it hits home for millions. Americans may see it as distant, but tariffs and surcharges mean higher prices and job uncertainty. Canadians face inflation and tough questions about economic dependence on the U.S. The best hope is a quick de-escalation and a return to negotiation. But if threats become reality, the damage could last for years. Supply chains broken, tourism devastated, and trust eroded. The world's longest undefended border is at a crossroads. Will it remain a symbol of partnership, or become a new front in a global trade war? The outcome will shape North America's future.